do not belong here." The words cut through the evening air like a blade, sharp and cold and designed to wound. Ilara stopped at the palace gates, her worn shoes scuffing against the ancient stone pathway that led to the grand entrance where hundreds of elegantly dressed women were gathering for the ritual of the blood moon. The voice belonged to Lady Seraphina Nightshade, daughter of the High Chancellor, her silver gown shimmering under the moonlight like liquid mercury, her perfectly styled black hair cascading down her back in waves that probably took 3 servants' hours to achieve. Seraphina stood flanked by her usual entourage of noblewomen, all of them looking at Ilara with expressions ranging from amusement to outright disgust. "Did you lose your way back to the kitchens, little mouse?" Seraphina continued, her crimson lips curving into a smile that held no warmth. "Or did you actually think you could participate in the ritual? You who does not even have a wolf?" The laughter that followed felt like tiny needles pricking Ilara's skin. She had known this would happen. She had told herself 1,000 times on the walk from the servants' quarters that she should turn back, that coming here was madness, that she had no business standing among the eligible women of the realm. But something had pulled her here tonight, something she could not name or explain, a force that felt older than words and stronger than fear. "I was summoned," Ilara said quietly, her voice barely carrying over the murmurs of the crowd that was beginning to gather around them, drawn by the promise of entertainment at someone else's expense. The decree said all women of age in the kingdom. Seraphina's laugh was like breaking glass. The decree was meant for women, not servants, not wolfless abominations who should have been cast out at birth. She stepped closer, close enough that Ilara could smell her expensive perfume, something with notes of jasmine and dominance. "Tell me, little mouse, what do you think will happen when you stand before Alpha King Demon? Do you think he will look at you and see his destined mate? A girl who scrubs floors and empties chamber pots? A girl whose own parents abandoned her because she was defective?" Each word was carefully chosen, each one finding its mark. Ilara felt her cheeks burn with shame, but she held her ground. She had survived 22 years of this treatment, 22 years of being less than nothing in the eyes of everyone around her. One more night would not break her. "I will take my chances," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "If the moon goddess wills it." The slap came so fast that Ilara did not see it coming. Her head snapped to the side, her cheek exploding with pain as Seraphina's hand connected with her face. The crowd gasped, but no one moved to help her. No one ever did. "Do not speak of the moon goddess," Seraphina hissed, her beautiful face twisted with genuine anger. "Now, do not dare invoke her name when you are an insult to her creation. You have no wolf. You have no family. You have no worth. And you certainly have no right to stand at these gates pretending you are anything other than the trash you were born to be." Ilara stumbled backward, her hand pressed to her burning cheek, tears stinging her eyes despite her best efforts to hold them back. She should leave. She should turn around and run back to the safety of the kitchens where at least the cruelty was familiar and expected. But her feet would not move. That strange pull she had felt all evening was stronger now, thrumming through her bones like a second heartbeat, anchoring her to this spot as surely as if roots had grown from her feet into the earth below. What is happening here? The new voice cut through the tension like a knife through silk, deep and commanding and carrying an authority that made everyone, including Seraphina, freeze. Beta Marcus stepped through the crowd, his tall frame and military bearing making people instinctively move aside. He was second in command to the Alpha King himself, a warrior with eyes that missed nothing and a reputation for fairness that was rare among the higher ranks. His gaze swept over the scene, taking in Seraphina's raised hand, Ilara's reddening cheek, the circle of onlookers who suddenly found the ground very interesting. "Lady Seraphina," Marcus said, his tone carefully neutral, but with an edge that suggested he saw exactly what had transpired. "Is there a problem?" Seraphina's expression smoothed instantly into one of innocent concern. Not at all, Beta Marcus. I was simply informing this servant that she has made a mistake in coming here. The ritual is for eligible women of proper standing. Surely you agree that there are standards that must be maintained. Marcus's eyes shifted to Alara, and she saw something flicker in them that might have been sympathy. The Alpha King's decree was clear. All women of age within the kingdom are to present themselves for the ritual of the blood moon. I do not recall any mention of stations or standing in that decree. Seraphina's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Certainly you cannot mean that wolfless servants are to be included. That would be a mockery of the ritual itself, of the sacred bond between true mates. The Alpha King seeks a queen, not a kitchen maid. She said the last words with such venom that several women in the crowd tittered nervously. Marcus studied Seraphina for a long moment, long enough that her smile began to falter. What the Alpha King seeks is not for you or I to determine, Lady Seraphina. That is between him and the moon goddess. If this young woman wishes to participate in the ritual, she has every right to do so. Unless you believe you know the will of the goddess better than she does herself. It was a masterful trap, and Seraphina knew it. To argue further would be to question the goddess, which could be seen as heresy. Her eyes flashed with barely contained rage, but she forced another smile. Of course not, Beta Marcus. I simply worry for the poor girl. The ritual can be overwhelming even for those of us trained in court protocols. I would hate to see her humiliate herself. The false concern in her voice made Alara's stomach turn, but she found herself speaking before she could think better of it. I appreciate your concern, Lady Seraphina, but I am quite capable of handling whatever comes. The words emerged stronger than she felt, and she saw genuine surprise flash across several faces in the crowd. Servants did not speak back to nobility. Servants especially did not speak back to Seraphina Nightshade. But Alara was done being silent. If she was going to be humiliated, if she was going to be proven worthless and defective in front of the entire kingdom, then at least she would face it with her head held high. Seraphina's eyes narrowed to slits. You will regret this, she said softly, her voice pitched low enough that only Alara could hear. Before this night is over, you will wish you had stayed in your place. Then she turned with a swirl of silver silk and swept through the gates, her entourage following like planets orbiting a dark star. The crowd began to disperse, whispers and giggles following in their wake. But Alara barely noticed. She was staring at the gates themselves, massive structures of iron and stone that had stood for centuries, covered in intricate carvings of wolves and moons and symbols she did not recognize. As Beta Marcus gestured for her to follow the other women inside, Alara reached out almost unconsciously and placed her palm against the cold metal of the gate. The world exploded into silver light. It was not a gentle glow or a soft shimmer. It was a detonation of pure luminescence that erupted from the ancient runes carved into the gates, racing along the metal tracery like lightning through storm clouds, illuminating symbols that had not shone in over 1,000 years. Alara gasped and tried to pull her hand away, but she could not move. The light was pouring through her now, racing up her arm and spreading through her chest, filling her veins with liquid moonlight and making her skin glow as if she had swallowed the moon itself. Around her, women screamed and stumbled backward. Beta Marcus swore and reached for her, but the light intensified when he got close, forcing him back. And in the palace above, in the throne room where Alpha King Demon was preparing for the ritual, he felt it. The bond snapped into place with the force of a physical blow, stealing his breath and driving him to his knees. His wolf surged forward with a roar of recognition that shook the walls, and for the first time in his 30 years of life, Demon understood what the ancient texts meant when they spoke of true mates. She was here. His other half, the one the moon goddess herself had created to stand beside him. And she was in danger. Demon was moving before conscious thought caught up with instinct, his powerful legs carrying him through the palace corridors at a speed that would have been impossible for a human. Behind him he heard his gamma, Stefan, calling out in confusion, but he did not stop. He could not stop. Every cell in his body was screaming at him to get to her, to protect her, to claim what was his. He burst through the main doors and onto the front steps, just as the light from the gates began to fade, leaving after-images burned into everyone's retinas. The scene before him was chaos. Dozens of elegantly dressed women were scattered across the courtyard, in various states of shock and fear, some crying, others simply staring at the gates with expressions of disbelief. Beta Marcus stood closest to the gates, his hand still outstretched as if he had been trying to reach someone. And there, collapsed at the base of the ancient gates with silver light still dancing across her skin like dying embers, was a young woman in a plain gray servant's dress. Demon's wolf roared again, and he felt his canines elongate despite his iron control. Mine. The word was out before he could stop it, a guttural claim that carried across the courtyard with undeniable authority. Every head turned toward him. Every eye widened in shock. Because Alpha King Demon had just declared his mate bond in front of witnesses, something that could not be taken back, something that bound him by the oldest laws of their kind. And his mate was a servant. Demon reached the girl in 3 long strides, dropping to his knees beside her and gathering her carefully into his arms. Up close, he could see that she was young, probably early 20s, with delicate features that would have been pretty if not for the obvious signs of malnutrition and hard labor. Her hands were rough and scarred from work, her hair was a simple brown pulled back in a practical braid, and her dress was patched and worn. She was no one. Nothing. A servant who should have been invisible, and she was the most important person in his entire world. "Get the pack doctor," Demon commanded, his voice rough. "Now!" Marcus was already running. Stefan appeared at Demon's side, his usually jovial face creased with concern and confusion. "My king, what happened?" "The gates. They have not responded to anyone in centuries. Not since the last primordial died and the bloodline ended. How could a servant girl trigger the ancient wards?" Demon looked down at the unconscious woman in his arms, at the way silver light still pulsed faintly beneath her skin in time with her heartbeat, at the unmistakable mark that was beginning to form on her left shoulder, where his teeth would soon create the claiming bite. The mark of a true mate. "Because she is not just a servant," he said slowly, his mind racing through implications and impossibilities. "She is primordial. The bloodline did not end. It was hidden." The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Around them, the gathered women burst into frantic whispers. Serafina pushed her way to the front of the crowd, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. "That is impossible," she declared, her voice shaking slightly. "The primordials died out. Everyone knows this. You cannot possibly believe that this nobody carries the blood of the first wolves. It is absurd. She probably used some kind of magic, some trick to make the gates respond. She should be arrested for tampering with sacred relics, not treated like royalty." Demon's eyes snapped to Serafina, and what she saw there made her take an involuntary step back. His eyes were no longer the cool gray she was used to seeing at court functions. They were pure gold, his wolf so close to the surface that his human form was barely containing it. "Are you questioning my mate bond, Lady Serafina?" Each word was measured and dangerous, because that would be the same as questioning the will of the moon goddess herself. "And I am quite certain that heresy is still punishable by exile in this kingdom." Serafina's face went white. Around her, the other noble women were inching away, none of them wanting to be associated with someone who had just potentially committed heresy in front of their king. "No, my king, I would never. I only meant that perhaps there has been some mistake, some confusion." Surely the goddess would not choose someone so unsuitable for your queen. Think of the kingdom. Think of the alliances. Think of what the council will say. It was the wrong thing to say. Demon rose to his feet in one fluid motion. The unconscious girl cradled against his chest, as if she weighed nothing at all. The moon goddess does not make mistakes, Lady Seraphina. And I do not answer to the council when it comes to matters of sacred bonds. This woman is my mate. She will be my queen. And anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to challenge me for the right to rule. His voice carried. Across the courtyard, a clear declaration that left no room for argument. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. The silence that followed was absolute. No one would challenge Demon. He was not just the Alpha King by birthright. He had earned his position through countless battles and trials. He was the strongest wolf in living memory, a warrior king who had united the fractured packs under one banner. Through a combination of strategic brilliance and sheer physical dominance. To challenge him was suicide, but Demon knew that silence in the face of power was not the same as acceptance. The noble families would be furious, the council would demand explanations, and Seraphina, judging by the look of pure hatred she was trying and failing to hide, would not let this go easily. He did not care. Let them rage. Let them plot. This woman in his arms was his mate, chosen by the goddess herself, and he would burn the kingdom to the ground before he let anyone harm her. Stefan, he said quietly, I want guards posted outside the medical wing. No one gets in or out without my direct permission. And I want a full investigation into who this woman is, where she came from, and why her bloodline was hidden. Start with the palace records. If she has been working here, there will be documentation. Stefan nodded and hurried off to carry out the orders. Demon turned back toward the palace, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed him. The ritual would have to wait. Everything would have to wait until his mate was safe and conscious, and he could begin to understand what the moon goddess had planned. Because there was no doubt in his mind that this was part of a larger design. The gates responding, the primordial blood, the timing of it all. It was too perfect to be coincidence. The goddess was moving her pieces across the board, and Demon had just become a key player in whatever game she was orchestrating. He carried his mate through the palace corridors, aware of servants and nobles alike pressing themselves against walls to let him pass, their eyes wide with shock and speculation. By morning, the entire kingdom would know that their Alpha King had found his mate, and that she was a servant girl who had somehow awakened the ancient gates. The political fallout would be enormous. He found himself smiling grimly at the thought. Let them talk. Let them scheme. He had spent his entire life doing what was expected, what was politically expedient, what was best for the kingdom. But this was something different. This was fate. This was the moon goddess herself, telling him that there were forces at work beyond politics and alliances, and carefully arranged marriages. The pack doctor, an elderly woman named Clara, who had been healing wolves since before Demon was born, was already waiting when he reached the medical wing. She took one look at the unconscious girl, and her eyes widened. Bring her here, she said, gesturing to a bed in the private examination room. And then, my king, you need to leave. Demon's wolf snarled at the suggestion. I am not leaving her. Clara met his eyes without flinching, one of the few people in the kingdom who could do so. You are radiating enough alpha energy to make every wolf in a 3-mile radius submit. She needs calm to recover, not a possessive mate hovering over her and making her wolf feel threatened before it has even had a chance to wake properly. Now get out and let me work. I will call you the moment she begins to stir. It went against every instinct, but Damon forced himself to set his mate gently on the bed and step back. She is primordial, he said quietly. The gates responded to her. Whatever you find, whatever is happening to her, it is connected to that bloodline. Clara's weathered face showed surprise for just a moment, before professional calm reasserted itself. Then we will need to be very careful. Primordial awakenings are different from normal wolves. The old texts speak of transformations that could last days, visions, physical changes. I will monitor her closely. Demon nodded and forced himself to leave the room, though his wolf fought him every step of the way. Stefan was waiting in the corridor with 2 guards who took up positions outside the medical wing door. The council has requested an emergency meeting, Stefan said carefully. Hi. Chancellor Nightshade is demanding to speak with you immediately. Of course he was. Demon had just publicly claimed his daughter's rival as his mate. The political alliance that Seraphina's family had been counting on had just evaporated in a flash of silver light. Tell the council I will meet with them in 1 hour, Demon said. And tell the High Chancellor that if he ever sends his daughter to harass my mate again, I will consider it an act of aggression against the crown. Stefan's eyebrows rose almost to his hairline, but he nodded and hurried off. Demon leaned against the wall outside the medical wing, closing his eyes and trying to calm the storm of emotions raging inside him. His wolf wanted to break down the door and return to their mate. The king in him knew he needed to deal with the political crisis this had created. And underneath it all was a growing sense of wonder and destiny that he had never felt before. The moon goddess had given him a gift tonight. She had given him his other half, his true mate, the one person in all the world who would complete him. And she had done it in a way that challenged every assumption, every tradition, every carefully laid plan. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. And Demon would not change a single thing. Inside the medical wing, Alara was drowning in silver light and ancient memories that were not her own. She could see wolves running through primordial forests, could feel the power of the first transformation, could hear the voice of the moon goddess herself, speaking words in a language that no living being remembered, but that Alara understood in her soul. You are my daughter, the goddess said, her voice like music and thunder combined. Hidden and protected until the time was right, the kingdom faces a darkness that is returning, a shadow from the age before wolves walked as men. And you, my child, are the key to stopping it. But first, you must wake. You must claim your power. You must become who you were always meant to be. The light intensified, and Alara felt something fundamental shift inside her. A presence that had always been there but dormant, sleeping, waiting. Her wolf. But not just any wolf. A creature of pure silver light and ancient power, an alpha among alphas, a predator that made ordinary wolves look like puppies in comparison. The pain of the awakening was indescribable. It felt like her bones were breaking and reforming, her muscles tearing and reknitting stronger, her very DNA rewriting itself to accommodate the power that was flooding through her. She tried to scream but could not make a sound. The transformation was happening inside her mind, in the space between heartbeats, in a place where physical reality did not quite apply. When it was finally over, when the light began to fade and the memories began to settle into place, Alara opened her eyes to find herself staring at a ceiling she did not recognize. The room was clean and bright, with morning. Sunlight streaming through windows that were far too large and expensive to be in the servants' quarters. For a moment, panic flared. Where was she? What had happened? And then the memories came rushing back. The gates, the light, the feeling of ancient power recognizing her and claiming her as its own. She sat up slowly, her body feeling strange and new, like she was wearing skin that fit better than the old one had. Her hands looked the same, but felt different, stronger, more capable. She could hear things she had never heard before, the heartbeats of people in distant rooms, conversations happening floors away, the rustle of wind through trees outside. Easy, a gentle voice said, and Alara turned to see an elderly woman sitting in a chair beside the bed, her kind eyes studying Alara with professional interest. You have been unconscious for almost 10 hours. Your body has been through a significant transformation. You need to take things slowly. 10 hours. Alara's mind struggled to process that. Where am I? Her voice came out rough and unused. The palace medical wing. You are safe. My name is Clara, and I am the pack doctor. You collapsed after touching the ancient gates. Do you remember what happened? Alara nodded slowly. There was light. So much light. And voices. Memories that were not mine. The moon goddess. She spoke to me. She said I am. She trailed off, the words sounding insane even to her own ears. Primordial, Clara finished. Yes, child. You carry the blood of the first wolves, a bloodline everyone believed extinct. The gates recognized you and triggered your awakening. Your wolf has been dormant your entire life, sleeping and waiting for the right moment to emerge. That moment was last night. Alara stared at her hands, at the faint silver glow that seemed to pulse beneath her skin. I have a wolf? She had spent her entire life being called defective, broken, worthless because she was wolfless. And now, this woman was telling her that she had not been defective at all, just dormant. You have more than a wolf, child. You have one of the most powerful wolves I have ever encountered. When your transformation is complete, when you learn to shift fully, you will be a force unlike anything this kingdom has seen in 1,000 years. But that is a discussion for later. Right now, there is someone who desperately wants to see you. As if on cue, the door burst open, and Alpha King Demon strode in, his presence filling the room like a thunderstorm barely contained in human form. Alara's breath caught in her throat. She had seen the king before, of course, from a distance when he walked through the palace or addressed the staff. But she had never been this close to him, never felt the sheer power that radiated from him like heat from a flame. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a warrior's build that his formal clothing could not hide. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it repeatedly, and his gray eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to both run away and move closer at the same time. You are awake, he said, and his voice was rough with emotion he was barely controlling. Thank the goddess. He moved toward the bed, and Alara found herself pressing back against the pillows, suddenly very aware that she was in a nightgown she did not remember putting on, and that the most powerful man in the kingdom was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. My king, she whispered, lowering her eyes in automatic deference. I am sorry. I did not mean to cause trouble. I should not have come to the gates. I will return to my duties immediately. Look at me, Demon interrupted, his voice carrying a note of command that her newly awakened wolf responded to instinctively. Her eyes snapped up to meet his, and the moment their gazes locked, the world shifted. The mate bond, which had been forming in potential when she touched the gates, snapped fully into place now that she was conscious and aware. It was like a rope of pure golden light stretching between them, connecting their souls in a way that was both terrifying and absolutely right. Alara gasped, her hand flying to her chest where she could feel the bond settling into place, warm and solid and unbreakable. Demon's expression softened, and he closed the remaining distance between them, kneeling beside the bed so that they were at eye level. You are my mate, he said quietly, his hand reaching out to cup her cheek with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so powerful. Chosen by the moon goddess herself. You do not bow to me. You do not apologize to me. You stand beside me as my equal, as my queen, as my other half. Do you understand? Alara's mind was reeling. This could not be real. Things like this did not happen to girls like her. She was nobody, nothing. A servant who scrubbed floors and emptied chamber pots. She was not queen material. She was not worthy of an alpha king. She was. "I can hear your thoughts through the bond," Demon said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "And every single one of them is wrong. You are not nobody. You are primordial. You carry the blood of the first wolves in your veins. You awakened gates that have been dormant for over 1,000 years. You are my mate, chosen by the goddess herself. And whether you believe it yet, or not, you are exactly where you are supposed to be." Tears were streaming down Alara's face now, and she was not even sure why. Relief, fear, joy, disbelief, all of it mixing together in a knot of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. "I do not know how to be a queen," she whispered. "I do not know anything about politics or protocol or running a kingdom. I do not even know how to use the right fork at dinner. How can I possibly stand beside you when I know nothing about your world?" Demon's smile widened, and he leaned forward to press his forehead against hers, a gesture of intimacy and trust that made Alara's newly awakened wolf purr with contentment. "Then I will teach you. We will learn together. Because I may know how to be a king, but I have no idea how to be a mate. I have no idea how to share my life with someone, how to trust someone with all of myself, how to build something real instead of just maintaining political alliances. We are both stepping into unknown territory, but we will do it together." The words were exactly what she needed to hear. Not promises that everything would be easy, not dismissals of her very real concerns, but an acknowledgement that they were both entering something new and challenging. Together. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Clara cleared her throat softly, reminding them that they were not alone. "I hate to interrupt, but the council is waiting, my king. And there are some things the young lady needs to know before she faces them." Demon pulled back reluctantly, his hand lingering on Alara's cheek for a moment before he forced himself to stand. "Tell me." Clara's expression turned serious. "The awakening is not complete. It will continue to progress over the next several days. She will experience heightened senses, stronger emotions, possible visions or memories from her bloodline. She needs to stay calm and avoid stress as much as possible. Any strong emotional upheaval could trigger an uncontrolled shift, and with primordial power, that could be dangerous." Demon's jaw tightened. "Then perhaps facing the council should wait. I will not risk her health for their political games." But Alara found herself speaking before she could think better of it. "No, I should meet them. If I am to be queen, if this is truly my destiny, then hiding away will only make things worse. They need to see me. They need to understand that I am not going anywhere." Both Demon and Clara looked at her in surprise. The timid servant girl who had been on this bed moments ago was gone, replaced by someone who carried herself with a quiet strength that had not been there before. The awakening was already changing her in ways that went beyond the physical. Demon's eyes gleamed with approval and pride. "Are you certain? The council will not be kind. They will question you, test you, try to find weaknesses they can exploit. High Chancellor Nightshade in particular will do everything in his power to discredit you and push for a different match." Alara thought of Seraphina's cruel smile, of the slap that had sent her stumbling backward, of 22 years of being told she was worthless. "I have faced cruelty before, my king. I have survived it. Whatever they throw at me, I can handle it." The smile that crossed Demon's face was fierce and proud. "Then we face them together. But first, you need clothing befitting your new position. I will have the royal. Seamstress, bring options to your chambers." Your chambers. The word sent another wave of unreality through Alara. She had chambers now. She was not a servant anymore. Her entire world had changed in the space of a single night. "Actually," Clara interjected, "I would recommend she wear something simple. The council is already going to be resistant to her because of her background. Dressing her in royal finery immediately might seem like she is trying too hard, like she is playing dress-up. But if she appears before them in something modest yet dignified, it shows confidence without arrogance. It was good advice, and Demon nodded slowly. Very well. Something simple but appropriate. And Alara? He paused until she met his eyes. Remember that you do not have to prove anything to them. You are my mate. That is the only credential that matters. Everything else is just politics, and I have been navigating those waters my entire life. Trust me to handle them. Alara wanted to trust him. But years of fending for herself, of learning that the only person she could rely on was herself, made it hard to simply hand over control. Still, she nodded. I trust you. The words felt like a promise, like the first real commitment she had made to this impossible new reality. Demon leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, a gesture that was somehow more intimate than anything else that had passed between them. I will see you in 1 hour. Clara will help you prepare. And, Alara, you are stronger than you know. Never forget that. Then he was gone, striding from the room with the controlled power of a predator, leaving Alara alone with Clara and a whirlwind of emotions she was not sure how to process. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Clara helped her bathe and dress in a simple but elegant gown of deep blue that brought out the unusual silver undertones in her eyes that had not been there before the awakening. A maid came to arrange her hair, pulling it back, in a style that was far more sophisticated than Alara's usual practical braid, but still understated. Clara also spent time explaining the basics of court protocol, which members of the council were likely to be hostile, and how to address them without showing either weakness or arrogance. By the time a guard knocked on the door to escort her to the council chambers, Alara felt like her head was spinning with information, and her stomach was twisted into knots. But she forced herself to stand, tall, to channel the strength she had felt when the ancient power had awakened inside her. She was primordial. She was the Alpha King's mate. She was chosen by the moon goddess herself, and she would not let fear control her anymore. The council chambers were exactly as intimidating as Alara had imagined. A long table made of dark wood dominated the center of the room, surrounded by high-backed chairs occupied by the most powerful members of the kingdom. High Chancellor Nightshade sat at the far end, his expression cold and calculating, his resemblance to his daughter evident in the sharp angles of his face and the cruel intelligence in his eyes. Around him sat the heads of the other major families, the military commanders, the advisors who had served kings for generations. And at the head of the table, looking every inch the warrior king, sat Demon. His eyes found hers the moment she entered, and the mate bond flared to life between them, steadying her, reminding her that she was not alone. Demon stood as she approached, a gesture of respect that made several council members shift uncomfortably. Council members, allow me to introduce Alara, my mate and your future queen. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush stone. High Chancellor Nightshade was the first to speak, his voice dripping with barely concealed contempt. With all due respect, my king, this is highly irregular. We have not even had time to verify her identity, to understand who she truly is or where she came from. For all we know, she could be a plant from a rival kingdom, using dark magic to manipulate the ancient wards and deceive you into believing she is your mate. Demon's eyes flashed gold with barely restrained fury. Are you suggesting that I, an Alpha King with over 30 years of experience, cannot tell the difference between true mate bond and manipulation? Are you suggesting that the moon goddess herself has been deceived? It was a dangerous accusation, and Nightshade knew it. He held up his hands in a placating gesture. Of course not, my king. I would never question the goddess or your judgment. I simply believe that in matters of such importance, we should proceed with caution. The young woman's background is, shall we say, questionable. She has no family, no history, no connections. She appeared at the palace as a child and has worked in the kitchens ever since. We know nothing about her parents or her lineage, and now we are expected to accept her as queen based solely on a flash of light at the gates? Another council member, Lady Morgana, an elderly wolf with shrewd eyes and a reputation for fairness, spoke up. High Chancellor, the gates have not responded to anyone in over 1,000 years. The runes that activated are primordial in origin, designed to recognize only those of the oldest and purest bloodlines. If the gates acknowledged her, then her lineage is beyond question, regardless of her personal circumstances. Nightshade's jaw tightened. Or perhaps someone found a way to activate the wards artificially. Dark magic has grown more common in recent years. We cannot rule out the possibility of tampering. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Elara felt anger rising inside her, hot and fierce, and with it came a surge of power that made the air in the room crackle with energy. Every wolf present felt it, their instincts responding to the presence of an alpha predator. She had not said a word yet, but suddenly every eye in the room was fixed on her, not with contempt or suspicion, but with the primal wariness of those who recognized a superior force. I did not tamper with anything, Elara said quietly, her voice carrying despite its softness. I did not use dark magic. I did not manipulate anyone. I simply touched the gates because something inside me told me to, and they responded to blood that I did not know I carried. If that is not enough proof for you, High Chancellor, then perhaps you should take your concerns directly to the moon goddess herself. I am sure she would be fascinated to hear how you know better than she does about her own designs. The council chamber erupted into shocked murmurs. Servants did not speak to High Chancellors that way. Servants certainly did not challenge nobility in front of the king and council. But Elara was not a servant anymore, and she was done being silent. Nightshade's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, Demon spoke, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Lady Elara makes an excellent point. Unless someone here has evidence of tampering beyond baseless suspicion, I suggest we move past this line of questioning. The mate bond is real. The gate's response was real. Her bloodline is primordial. These are facts, not theories. What we should be discussing is how to proceed from here. Lady Morgana nodded thoughtfully. I agree. The question is not whether Lady Elara is the king's true mate, but rather how we present this to the kingdom and what steps need to be taken to prepare her for her role as queen. She will need education in court protocols, diplomatic relations, pack law, and kingdom management. She will need a household staff, advisors, guards. These are practical matters that require planning, not philosophical debates about fate and destiny. It was a masterful redirect, and Elara felt a surge of gratitude toward the older woman. She was providing a path forward that acknowledged Elara's position, while also giving the council something concrete to focus on besides their objections. I am willing to learn, Elara said, addressing Lady Morgana directly. I understand that my background has not prepared me for this role. But I am not afraid of hard work, and I am not afraid of challenge. I will do whatever is necessary to be worthy of the position the moon goddess has given me. She saw approval flash across several faces, though Nightshade and his allies still looked like they were chewing on glass. Demon stood and moved to stand beside Elara, his hand coming to rest on her lower back in a gesture of support and possessive claiming that every wolf in the room recognized. Lady Morgana, I am placing you in charge of Elara's education and preparation. You have my full authority to assemble whatever team you need. I want her ready for a formal presentation to the kingdom in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Elara's stomach dropped. That was not very much time to learn everything she needed to know. But Morgana simply nodded, as if training someone to be queen in less than a month was a perfectly reasonable request. It will be done, my king. Lady Elara, you and I will begin tomorrow morning. Another council member, General Thorne, a grizzled warrior with scars covering half his face, spoke up. There is another matter we need to address. The gates responding has implications beyond just the mate bond. The primordials were not just powerful wolves. They were guardians, protectors against threats that ordinary wolves could not handle. The gates only awaken when such a threat is present or approaching. We need to be prepared for the possibility that something is coming, something that will require a primordial's power to stop. A chill ran down Alara's spine. She remembered the goddess's words from her vision. The kingdom faces a darkness that is returning, a shadow from the age before wolves walked as men. The goddess spoke to me during my awakening, Alara said slowly, and the room fell silent. She said there is a darkness returning, a shadow from the ancient times. She said I am meant to stop it, but she did not tell me what it is, or when it will come. The council members exchanged worried glances. Even Nightshade looked troubled, his personal vendetta momentarily forgotten in the face of a greater threat. Demon's hand tightened slightly on Alara's back, and she could feel his concern through the bond. Then we prepare for war, he said simply. General Thorne, I want increased patrols along all our borders, double the watch. If something is coming, I want advance warning. Lady Morgana, part of Alara's training needs to include understanding and controlling her primordial powers. If she is meant to face this threat, she needs to know what she is capable of. The general nodded grimly. I will see to it immediately, my king. Lady Morgana looked thoughtful. I may need to consult the old texts. In the Forbidden Archive, there are records from the primordial age that might give us insight into what kind of threats they faced and how they fought them. Such knowledge could be crucial. Demon nodded his approval, and the meeting continued for another hour, covering logistics and preparations and political considerations. Through it all, Alara stood beside Demon, learning, listening, beginning to understand just how complex the world she was entering truly was. By the time the council finally dispersed, she was exhausted, her newly awakened senses overwhelmed by all the information and emotion swirling through the room. As the last council member filed out, Nightshade paused at the door and turned back to look at Alara with cold calculation. Do not think this is over, girl. You may have fooled the gates and seduced the king, but I will be watching. One mistake, one slip, one moment of weakness, and I will make sure everyone sees you for what you truly are, a servant playing. At being royalty. Before Alara could respond, Demon was across the room, his hand wrapped around Nightshade's throat, slamming the older man against the wall with enough force to crack the stone. Let me make something perfectly clear, Chancellor. Demon's voice was a low growl, barely human. If you ever threaten my mate again, if you ever speak to her with anything less than the respect due a queen, if you ever try to undermine her in any way, I will consider it treason, and treason carries only one punishment in this kingdom. Do I make myself understood? Nightshade's face was turning purple, but he managed to nod. Demon held him there for another moment before releasing him with a disgusted sound. The Chancellor stumbled back, gasping, his hand going to his throat. For just a moment, genuine fear flashed across his face before his usual mask of cold composure slid back into place. Understood, my king, he rasped, then practically fled from the room. The door slammed behind him, leaving Demon and Alara alone in the sudden silence. Alara was staring at Demon with wide eyes, her heart racing. She had never seen violence like that before, never witnessed the raw power and protective fury that an alpha king could unleash. It should have frightened her. Instead, her wolf was practically purring with satisfaction. He had defended her, claimed her, protected her from a threat. I apologize, Demon said, turning to face her, his eyes still faintly golden. You should not have had to witness that, but I will not tolerate anyone threatening you, regardless of their position or family connections. Alara crossed the distance between them and placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. You do not need to apologize for protecting me. though I am starting to think I need to learn to protect myself. I cannot hide behind you every time someone says something cruel." Demon covered her hand with his, and the mate bond thrummed between them, warm and solid. "You will learn. Lady Morgana is one of the best warriors and strategists I know. She will teach you to fight, to defend yourself, to use your primordial powers. But that does not mean you face threats alone. That is what it means to have a mate. We protect each other." The words settled something inside Alara, something she had not realized was unsettled. For so long she had been alone, relying only on herself because there was no one else. But that was changing. She had a mate. Now, she had an ally, a partner, someone who would stand beside her against whatever came. "I am scared," she admitted quietly. "Of the council, of this darkness that is supposed to be coming, of failing at being queen. I am scared of all of it." Demon pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, pressing her face against his chest and breathing in his scent, pine and smoke and something wild that called to her wolf. "Fear is not weakness," he murmured against her hair. "Fear is wisdom. It tells us to be careful, to be prepared, to respect the challenges ahead. But it does not have to control us. We can be scared and still move forward. We can acknowledge the danger and still face it with courage." They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, and the bond that connected them, finding strength in the simple fact of being together. Finally, Demon pulled back slightly and looked down at her with an expression that was part tenderness and part hunger. "There is one more thing we need to discuss. The mate bond is not complete. It will not be complete until we perform the claiming ritual, until I mark you and you mark me in return. Once that is done, we will be connected on a level that goes beyond even what we feel now. Our thoughts, our emotions, our very souls will be intertwined. It is not something to be done lightly." Ilara felt heat bloom in her cheeks, understanding the implications of what he was saying. The claiming ritual was intimate, physical, a joining that would bind them together for life. "When?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Demon's eyes darkened with desire, but his voice remained gentle. "When you are ready. There is no rush. I know everything is happening very fast for you. You have gone from servant to mate to future queen in less than 24 hours. I will not add to that pressure by pushing for the ritual before you are comfortable." The consideration, the care in his words, made Alara's chest tighten with emotion. He was the Alpha King. He could demand the ritual immediately, could claim her by right of the mate bond. But instead, he was giving her choice, giving her control over this one aspect of her rapidly changing life. "Thank you," she said softly, "for understanding, for being patient with me." Demon smiled and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You are worth the wait, Alara. You are worth everything." The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity and learning that left Alara's head spinning and her body exhausted every night. Lady Morgana proved to be a demanding but fair teacher, drilling Alara on everything from proper forms of address for foreign dignitaries to the complex history of pack alliances and territorial disputes. In the mornings, Alara learned etiquette and protocol. In the afternoons, she trained with weapons and hand-to-hand combat, discovering that her primordial strength made her a formidable fighter even without formal training. In the evenings, she studied pack law and kingdom management, learning how to read financial reports and make strategic decisions. And through it all, her bond with Demon grew stronger. They shared meals when his schedule allowed, walked together in the palace gardens, talked late into the night about everything from childhood memories to philosophical questions about fate and free will. He was patient with her learning curve, supportive when she struggled, proud when she succeeded, and gradually, the scared servant girl began to transform into something more. Ilara's confidence grew. Her posture changed, her voice became stronger. She learned to meet the eyes of nobles without flinching, to respond to veiled insults with graceful redirection, to carry herself with the quiet authority of someone who knew her own worth. Her appearance changed too. The proper nutrition and rest she was finally getting filled out her too thin frame. Her hair, washed with expensive oils instead of harsh soap, grew, glossy and thick. Her skin took on a healthy glow. And her eyes, those strange silver undertoned eyes, seemed to see everything with a clarity that sometimes unnerved people. But the most dramatic changes were happening internally. Her wolf was growing stronger every day, pressing closer to the surface, teaching her to trust her instincts. She had visions sometimes, memories from her primordial ancestors showing her battles fought and won, showing her the true scope of the power she was meant to wield. And with each vision came more understanding of what she was meant to become. On the morning of her formal presentation to the kingdom, Elara stood before a mirror in the royal chambers that had been prepared for her, and barely recognized the woman staring back. She wore a gown of silver and white, the colors of the moon, designed specifically to honor her primordial heritage. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate style, woven with silver chains and moonstones. Around her neck hung a pendant bearing the royal crest, marking her as Daemon's chosen mate. She looked like a queen. She looked like someone who belonged in a palace, standing beside a king. You are staring at yourself with the same disbelief you had 3 weeks ago, Lady Morgana said from behind her, amusement clear in her voice. When will you accept that this is who you are now? Elara turned to face her teacher, a small smile playing at her lips. Perhaps when I stop expecting to wake up back in the servants' quarters, scrubbing floors and wondering if this was all a dream. Morgana's expression softened. It is not a dream, child. It is destiny. And you have risen to meet it more gracefully than many born to nobility would have. You should be proud of yourself. Pride was still a difficult emotion for Elara to access after a lifetime of being told she was worthless. But she was learning. I am grateful, she said instead, for your teaching, for your patience, for treating me like I was worth the effort. You were always worth the effort, Morgana replied firmly. Now come. The Alpha King is waiting, and you have a kingdom to meet. The presentation ceremony was being held in the grand throne room, a space large enough to hold over 1,000 wolves, and it seemed like every single one of them had come to catch a glimpse of their future queen. Elara could feel their eyes on her as she entered, could hear the whispers that followed her progress toward the throne where Daemon waited. Some of the whispers were curious, some were admiring, some were cruel. She ignored them all and kept her focus on Daemon, on the way his eyes lit up when he saw her, on the pride and love that radiated through their bond. When she reached the throne, he stood and descended the steps to meet her, taking her hands in his, in a gesture that made several people gasp. Kings did not descend to meet anyone. Kings remained seated while others approached. But Daemon had never been one for unnecessary tradition, and he was making a statement now. His queen was his equal. His queen would stand beside him, not kneel before him. You are breathtaking, he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. Then, louder, for the assembled crowd. People of the Silver Moon Kingdom, I present to you Lady Elara, my true mate, chosen by the moon goddess herself, carrier of primordial blood, and your future queen. The formal words rang through the chamber, and tradition demanded that the assembled wolves bow in acknowledgement. Most did. But Elara could see a number of people, particularly among the older noble families, who remained standing, their expressions ranging from disapproving to openly hostile. Seraphina Nightshade stood near the front, her beautiful face twisted into a mask of barely contained rage. Daemon noticed the holdouts too, and his expression darkened. But before he could say anything, Before he could force compliance through sheer dominance, Alara squeezed his hand and stepped forward. "I know many of you have doubts about me," she said, her voice carrying through the vast room with a strength that surprised even her. "I understand those doubts. I was a servant in this palace until 3 weeks ago. I have no family name, no connections, no traditional qualifications for the role I am being asked to fill. If our positions were reversed, I would have doubts too." She paused, letting her words sink in, seeing some of the hostile expressions shift to confusion. This was not what they had expected. They had expected a defensive speech, or perhaps no speech at all. They certainly had not expected her to acknowledge their concerns openly. "But here is what I do have," Alara continued. "I have the blood of the primordials running through my veins, a bloodline that protected this kingdom for thousands of years before it was thought to be lost. I have the recognition of the ancient gates, wards that were created by the moon goddess herself, and have not responded to anyone in over a millennium. I have the mate bond with your Alpha King, a connection that cannot be faked or manipulated. And I have the will to learn, to grow, to become worthy of the trust you are being asked to place in me." She turned slowly, making eye contact with as many people as she could, letting them see the determination in her eyes. "I am not asking you to love me. I am not even asking you to like me. I am simply asking you to give me a chance to prove myself. Judge me by my actions, not my origins. Judge me by what I do for this kingdom, not where I came from. And if I fail, if I prove unworthy of the position the goddess has given me, then your doubts will be vindicated. But until that day, I will work every day to earn your respect and serve this kingdom to the best of my ability." The silence that followed her speech was deafening. Then, slowly, one person began to clap. It was Lady Morgana, her weathered face showing approval and something that might have been pride. Others joined in, the applause spreading through the crowd like ripples in a pond. Not everyone. Some, like Seraphina and her father, remained stone-faced and silent, but enough people were applauding that it felt like a victory. Demon pulled her close and whispered in her ear, "That was magnificent. You are magnificent." Alara felt warmth spread through her chest, the mate bond pulsing with his pride and love. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this. Maybe she could become the queen they needed. The ceremony continued with formal oaths and rituals, with Demon presenting Alara to each of the major families and receiving their pledges of loyalty. Most gave it willingly. A few gave it through gritted teeth, and the Nightshade family did not give it at all, citing some obscure protocol that allowed them to delay their pledge until after the formal mating ceremony. It was a calculated insult, and everyone in the room knew it. But Demon let it pass, not wanting to start a civil war on what should be a day of celebration. After the ceremony, there was a feast and celebration that lasted well into the night. Alara moved through the crowd with Demon at her side, accepting congratulations and well wishes, deflecting subtle insults with the grace Morgana had taught her, slowly beginning to learn the intricate dance of court politics. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. As the night was winding down and guests were beginning to depart, Seraphina appeared in front of them, her face flushed from wine, and her eyes glittering with malice. "Quite the performance today, Lady Alara," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "You almost had me convinced that you belong here. Almost." Demon tensed beside Alara, but she placed a gentle hand on his arm, silently asking him to let her handle this. "Thank you, Lady Seraphina. I am glad you enjoyed it." Seraphina's smile sharpened. "Oh, I did not say I enjoyed it. I said, you almost convinced me. But we both know the truth, do we not? You are a pretender, a servant playing dress-up, and eventually everyone will see through the costume. The moon goddess does not make mistakes, people say. But I think she made a rather large one with you. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? The insult was blatant enough that several nearby conversations stopped, people turning to watch what would happen. Demon was vibrating with barely restrained fury, his wolf pushing for dominance. But Alara felt strangely calm. She had faced Seraphina's cruelty before. She had survived it. And now, standing here in her silver gown, with the mate bond connecting her to the most powerful wolf in the kingdom, with primordial power humming through her veins, Seraphina's words felt almost meaningless. You are entitled to your opinion, Lady Seraphina, Alara said quietly. But here's what. I know. The gates recognized me. The bond chose me. The goddess herself spoke to me during my awakening. If those things make me a mistake, then I am in excellent company. But if I were you, I would be very careful about questioning the goddess's choices. History shows she does not take kindly to that kind of hubris. For just a moment, genuine fear flashed across Seraphina's face as she remembered that the girl standing before her was primordial, was connected to power that dwarfed anything Seraphina could access. Then her mask slipped back into place. We shall see, she said coldly, then turned and swept away, her expensive gown trailing behind her like a threat. Demon pulled Alara close, his arms wrapping around her from behind, his chin resting on top of her head. You handled that beautifully. She was trying to provoke you, trying to make you lose control in front of witnesses, and you refused to take the bait. Alara leaned back against his solid warmth, feeling safe and protected and stronger than she had ever felt in her life. I am tired of letting her make me feel small. I am tired of letting anyone make me feel like I do not deserve to be here. Lady Morgana taught me that confidence is not about believing you are perfect. It is about believing you are worthy of growth and learning. And I am worthy of that. We all are. Demon turned her in his arms so he could look down at her, his eyes soft with something that made her heart race. I love you, he said. Simply. I know we have only known each other for 3 weeks. I know this is all happening impossibly fast. But I love you, Alara. Not because fate chose you for me. Because of who you are, how you face challenges, the strength you show even when you are terrified. I love you. The words hit Alara like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making her eyes sting with sudden tears. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever looked at her the way Demon was looking at her now. Like she was precious and rare and worth everything. I love you too, she whispered, and realized as she said it that it was completely true. Somewhere between the terror of the gates and the exhaustion of training and the countless late-night conversations, she had fallen in love with this complicated, powerful, surprisingly gentle man who had turned her entire world upside down. Demon's smile was radiant, and he leaned down to kiss her, a soft press of lips that quickly deepened into something more heated. Around them, the remaining guests applauded and cheered, but Alara barely heard them. She was lost in the kiss, in the mate bond that flared to life between them, in the certainty that this, right here, was where she was supposed to be. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Demon rested his forehead against hers. Will you complete the bond with me tonight? Will you let me claim you as mine, and claim me in return? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and possibility. Alara thought about everything that had happened, about how far she had come in such a short time. 3 weeks ago, she had been a servant with no hope and no future. Now she was standing in a ballroom wearing silver and moonlight, loved by an alpha king, carrying the power of the ancients in her blood. She was ready. She was finally ready to take this last step, to complete the bond and tie herself to Demon in a way that would last the rest of their lives. Yes, she said clearly, loudly enough that several nearby people heard and began whispering excitedly. Yes, I will complete the bond with you. The claiming ritual was performed that very night in Demon's private chambers, a space that was both masculine and welcoming, with a massive bed that Alara tried very hard not to think about. Lady Morgana was there as witness, as tradition required, along with Stefan and Clara. But they stood at the far edge of the room, giving the couple as much privacy as the ritual allowed. Demon led Alara to stand before the windows where moonlight streamed through, bathing them both in silver light. The claiming ritual is more than just a physical act, he explained softly. It is a melding of souls, a permanent joining that will link us in ways beyond what even the mate bond provides. Once it is complete, I will be able to sense your emotions, your location, your well-being, and you will be able to sense mine. We will be two halves of a E, whole, separate but connected, individual but united. Do you understand? Alara nodded, her heart racing but her resolve firm. I understand. Demon cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones with infinite gentleness. This is going to hurt at first. The bite, the marking, it is intense. But the pain will fade quickly, replaced by pleasure and completion. Trust me? She did not even have to think about it. I trust you. The kiss that followed was different from the one in the ballroom, deeper and more urgent, conveying weeks of restrained desire and barely controlled need. Alara melted into it, her hands coming up to grip Demon's shoulders, her body pressing against his as heat pooled low in her belly. She had never been with anyone before, never even been kissed until Demon, but her instincts and her wolf were guiding her, showing her what to do, where to touch, how to move. Demon pulled back long enough to help her out of the silver gown, his eyes darkening, with hunger as more of her skin was revealed. Then his own clothes were gone, and they were skin to skin, the mate bond singing between them with an intensity that made Alara dizzy. He guided her to the bed, laying her down with a reverence that made her feel cherished and desired and absolutely beautiful. And then he was covering her body with his mouth finding hers again as his hands explored, learning the curves and planes of her, making her gasp and arch into his touch. Are you certain? He asked one more time, his voice rough with need, but his eyes showing that he would stop even now if she asked. Yes, Alara breathed. Please, Demon. I want this. I want you. The joining was intense, a brief flare of pain that gave way almost immediately to pleasure and rightness and a sense of completion that brought tears to Alara's eyes. And then Demon's teeth were at her throat, his canines elongating as his wolf surged forward. The bite when it came was sharp and fierce, sending lightning through every nerve ending in her body. Alara cried out, but not in pain. The sensation was overwhelming, pleasure and possession and permanence all mixed together. Through the bond, she could feel Demon's emotions, his love and desire and fierce protectiveness, his joy at finally claiming his mate. And then her own wolf surged forward, her own canines sharpening, and she bit down on his shoulder in return, marking him as hers just as he had marked her. The bond snapped fully, into place with a sensation like the universe rearranging itself. Suddenly Alara could feel everything Demon felt, could sense his presence in her mind like a second consciousness, warm and protective and utterly devoted. And she knew he felt the same from her. They moved together, the physical joining intertwining with the spiritual and emotional bond, until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. When they finally reached completion, it was together, their voices crying, out in unison as pleasure crashed over them in waves that seemed to go on forever. Afterward, they lay tangled together, hearts racing and breathing hard, the bite marks on their skin already healing, but leaving permanent silver scars that would mark them as mated for the rest of their lives. That was, Alara started, then stopped, unable to find words for what she had just experienced. Perfect, Demon finished for her, pressing a kiss to her forehead. That was perfect. You are perfect. She smiled and snuggled closer to him, feeling safe and loved and complete, in a way she had never imagined possible. The witnesses had quietly left at some point during the ritual, giving them privacy. It was just the two of them now, mated and bonded and ready to face whatever came next. Together. They fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, the bond humming contentedly between them, and neither of them noticed the shadow that passed across the moon outside the window. Neither of them saw the way. The darkness seemed to pulse with malevolent life. Neither of them felt the ancient evil that was stirring in the forgotten places of the world, drawn by the awakening of primordial power, hungry and patient, and ready to reclaim what it had lost centuries ago. But they would feel it soon enough, because the real trial was just beginning, and Alara's true test would not be winning the acceptance of the court or learning to be a queen. It would be facing the darkness that her awakening had called. Fourth, the shadow that wanted nothing more than to consume the light she represented and plunge the kingdom into eternal night. But that was a battle for tomorrow. Tonight, Alara slept peacefully in her mate's arms, unaware that her destiny was about to demand everything she had and more. Unaware that being primordial meant being a guardian against forces that most wolves could not even comprehend. Unaware that the real story was only just beginning,